Well, for the past year and a half or so, I have been a staff chaplain at Crouse Hospital on a part-time basis. And for the most part, I minister to people who are seriously ill and wish to receive or are in need of the sacrament of anointing of the sick. And a few months ago, I visited this 50-year-old woman who was dying from lung cancer. I vaguely knew this woman from one of my former parishes, and I did have 2 conversations with her before she slipped into a coma from which she never recovered. For the next 2 weeks or so, when I was on call, I took time out to visit her in her room and give her a blessing. And it was at these meetings, these visits, that I met her mother, her brother, her sister, and 2 friends who were at her bedside 24/7. And from my conversations with these people, I learned so much about this woman's life. And I came to realize that this was one incredible person. So pridefully, the family shared with me about her dedication to her church in various organizations, her work as an artist, a dedicated teacher, her passion for fairness, for justice, all these which certainly elicited a response of caring, of respect, of loyalty and fidelity on the part of her family and friends who stood steadfastly by her bedside. In today's gospel, we listen to this familiar story of the paralytic being lowered into the room so that he could meet Jesus. And even though in the gospel we find him broken, probably hopeless, isolated, and certainly dependent on others to get to Jesus, I have to think that this paralyzed man in his own right was an incredible person too, to elicit such great assistance from his friends. His friends show remarkable respect and love and loyalty for him. They certainly cared enough to take some risk in bringing their ailing friend to Christ. They had to somehow get through the roof, all through the tack and the mud, to lower the mat so that the paralytic could meet Jesus. They had to risk being considered outcast themselves or being claimed unclean because of their contact with the paralytic. And no doubt some people probably were indignant that they had to wait in line now, that they were somehow breaking line. But without the physical strength, without the living faith, without the stubborn tenacity of his friends, the paralytic would never have made it to Jesus. And now, all this commotion going on, the gospel tells us, wall-to-wall people, murmurings of the scribes and the like. Jesus only sees one thing. His focus is on only one matter: the faith of these men that motivated their action, showing a total trust in him. When Jesus saw their faith, he was motivated then to act. Well, in some ways, these 4 men who helped the paralytic to meet Jesus are a symbol of the church. It is through this story that the evangelist, St. Mark, is teaching and reminding his community of their calling to be witnesses to the faith. They too are to express their faith by giving assistance, support, affirmation, not only to the broken, not only to the helpless, not only to the dependent like this paralytic, but to each other in the faithful community of believers, first and foremost. I am so mindful that the church carries on the ministry of Christ in the sacrament of reconciliation, the sacrament of anointing, a Holy Eucharist. But more and more, I can see how the ministry of Christ continues to the support and affirmation we give to each other in the ordinary events of life. Now, there are many points that could be made reflecting on this gospel, and certainly several lessons to be learned. The power of faith, the necessity of community, the approachability of Jesus, the peace and joy that comes from forgiveness of sins, our need for spiritual healing, the witness of the paralytic after he was cured. But I would like to go back to the story of the woman who was suffering from terminal lung cancer. In one of my visits, the family and friends expressed to me their feelings of helplessness, their feelings of frustration that they could not do anything to help this patient. And I shared with them that one thing they could do, the most important thing that they could do, the greatest gift that they could give, is the one they are already giving and doing. It's their self-giving. It's their presence. It's their affirmation. It's their steadfast love and respect. You know, after all the medical journals are reviewed and all the counseling books have been discussed, it still remains that love is the most powerful stimulant to healing that we know of. One psychiatrist calls this positive reinforcement. He says, what is positive reinforcement but love? But what is love but positive reinforcement? You know, standing on the brink of Lent now, we can take this message with us, the lessons, what we find in today's gospel, make that part of our lives. We can take that with us as we go into the Lenten season. After all, it is our call. It is within our grasp. It is within our reach. It's certainly doable. Always remembering that love is the most powerful stimulant to healing that we know of.